Good afternoon. The sitting is open. I remind members that they should insert their badge before taking the floor. As you begin your speech, please press the microphone button only once. The first item of business this afternoon is the debate on the report titled Women in the Economy, Employment, Entrepreneurship and Gender-Responsive Budgeting, document 16068, presented by Ms. Shena Nurcelik-Kanat on behalf of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. In order to finish by 5:50 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 5:35 to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call Ms. Selik-Kanat. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate.
Dear President, dear colleagues, according to the World Bank, 2.4 billion women today do not have the same economic rights as men, and geopolitical tensions and the fragmentation of world trade threaten to roll back decades of advances in women's economic empowerment. The OECD reports that 58% of women in OECD member states are employed compared to 73% of men, and only 1/3 of managerial posts are held by women. Women in full-time work earn 12% less than men, compared to 19% in 1995, with an even wider gap in part-time employment. Despite undeniable progress, economic equality between women and men remains far from reality. Why is this so? As I underlined in my report, women have come a long way in affirming their rightful place in the world's economies. But as in other areas, progress is much too slow. The economic impact of recent crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic and conflicts within and beyond Europe, has exposed the fragility of gender equality gains, creating a real risk of backsliding. It's more urgent now than ever to promote gender equality in the economy. In this context, my report outlines persistent economic inequalities and makes recommendations to address them. Financial autonomy is key to ensuring women take their rightful place in their homes, communities, and society. Yet in many countries, it remains out of reach. The unequal distribution of care responsibilities remains a major barrier to women's full participation in the economy, despite advances in parental leave and childcare, which are often hindered by insufficient investment in infrastructure and human resources. Education for girls and women has improved, leveling academic results, but this progress is not reflected in professional outcomes. Women remain overrepresented in education, health, and social work, while underrepresented in high-profit sectors such as science, technology, engineering, mathematics, due to persistent prejudice and, at times, their own lack of self-confidence. Women face multiple barriers to entering and remaining in the labor market. They experience more discrimination than men and are disproportionately affected by conscious and unconscious gender biases. These disadvantage women in recruitment and promotion, where they are expected to prove their competence and leadership to a greater extent than men, and their caregiving responsibilities often cast doubt on their perceived ability to perform efficiently. There is still insufficient recognition that empowering women would boost the economy as a whole, greater acknowledgement of which would foster broader support for gender equality. The recommendations I put forward in the draft resolution aim to address the underlying reasons preventing women's economic empowerment. I call for legislation and policies that are designed to ensure that no one is left out or left behind. Equality is not yet a reality anywhere, but for women and girls who are structurally underrepresented in the labor market, it's even further away. This exclusion results from systemic barriers, often reinforced by additional vulnerabilities, such as belonging to an ethnic or religious minority or having a migrant background. I urge member states to take decisive action by enacting and enforcing laws that address these forms of discrimination which intersect with and compound gender inequalities in the economy. Policies must be tailored to specific challenges of women from disadvantaged backgrounds and diverse groups, including single mothers, pregnant women, women with disabilities, women from minority groups, and women from rural areas, to ensure their equal access to economic opportunities. I call for reform and stronger enforcement of anti-discrimination laws and sanctions against racism, intolerance, and all forms of discrimination that undermine women's economic participation. Policymakers must make gender-responsive policies a top priority to accelerate meaningful change. In the resolution, I set out clear recommendations for member states to adopt measures to close gender gaps in employment and entrepreneurship, promote better work-life balance, and increase women's representation in economic decision-making positions in both public and private sectors. These measures are not optional. They are essential for increasing women's employment and ensuring equal opportunities in entrepreneurship. We must continue to advance and enforce laws. Legislation is slow, but it is steadily creating new opportunities for women. Many good practices in member states can guide effective action, from improvements in parental responsibility sharing to funding for micro-projects and startups led by women. I advocate for pay transparency, to expose and sanction gendered pay gaps. So-called women's jobs are characterized by low pay, disadvantaging women and failing to attract more men. Employment in care and medical fields in particular must be rewarded at its true value. I call for further promotion of women's participation in male-dominated sectors, such as STEM, as well as emerging fields like artificial intelligence and the digital and green economy. Training and mentoring programs are crucial to fostering a more inclusive digital and green future. In the uphill battle for gender equality, I believe gender-responsive budgeting is the most important and effective instrument policymakers have at hand. That is why, in my report, I have detailed GRB tools that should be used to create gender-equal budgets by restructuring revenues and expenditures to close gender gaps. Unfortunately, GRB is implemented less widely than expected in Council of Europe member states, and its potential benefits remain underutilized. This is why, in the resolution, I urge all member states to introduce and advance GRB by establishing strong legal frameworks and integrating gender analysis at all stages of the budget cycle, ensuring broader application at national, regional, and local levels. Budget decisions must be taken with women at the table. I call on all member states and parliaments to benefit from the good practices of countries with advanced GRB systems, such as Austria, Spain, and Sweden, ensuring that budgets are gender responsive from conception to implementation, with solid accountability mechanisms to measure results and adjust policies. I hope you support the resolution to address inequalities and promote women's economic empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Selik-Kanat. And now in the debate, I call first Bisera Kostadinowska-Stojczewska from Socialist Group, North Macedonia.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, let me congratulate the rapporteur for this wonderful report. Why is it wonderful and necessary? Because when more women work, economies grow. Women's economic empowerment increases economic diversification and income equality for shared prosperity. Women's economic empowerment means ensuring women can equally participate in and benefit from decent work and social protection, access markets and have control over resources, their own time, lives and bodies, and increased voice, agency and meaningful participation in economic decision-making at all levels, from the household to international institutions. Promoting women's economic justice and rights in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are key to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Increasing women's and girls' educational attainment contributes to women's economic empowerment and more inclusive, environmentally sustainable economic growth. Education, upskilling and reskilling, especially to keep pace with rapid technological transformations affecting jobs, are critical for women's and girls' health and well-being, as well as their income generation opportunities and participation in the formal labor market. Women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. Globally, the gender gap in labor force participation has hovered at 30% since 1990, with men's participation at around 80% and women's at around 50%. Labor force participation rates for women aged 25-54 in 2022 was 61.4% compared to 90.6% for men. Women in the same age group with at least one child under 6 experience a so-called motherhood penalty, as the gap widens from 29.2% to 42.6%, with female participation at 53.1% and male participation at 95.7%. Violence and harassment in the world of work affects women regardless of age, location, income, or social status. In 2021-22, 43% of bilateral allocable official development aid, which is aid that is paid directly from official government sources to recipient countries, has gender equality as a policy objective, down from 45% in 2019-2020. Of this aid, only 4% was dedicated to programs with gender equality as the principal objective, a similar shape from the previous period. The present report calls for more account to be taken of research showing women's potential and for more action to be taken, notably through gender-responsive budgeting tools embedded at all stages of national budget cycles and with built-in accountability mechanisms. European leaders must respond to the challenge of changing mindsets. There must be a will to break the glass ceiling and mend the broken rungs of the economic ladder. Let's all help the rapporteur do exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Albana Vokshi from EPP Group.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, on behalf of the EPP Group, I reaffirm our commitment to gender equality in the economy. Women's economic empowerment is not just about fairness, it is essential for social justice and sustainable growth. Despite their significant contribution, women still face systemic barriers in employment, entrepreneurship, and financial access. While progress has been made, deep-rooted inequalities persist. The gender pay gap remains a reality in many countries, with women earning less for the same work and have to struggle for career advancement. Many lack access to financial capital, limiting business opportunities and economic independence. In some cases, the challenges have worsened. In Albania, discrepancies in reported gender pay gaps between Instat and Ombudsman reflect an ongoing debate. Although women hold numerous ministerial and parliamentary positions, economic status and access to essential services have not improved accordingly. While I support the resolutions, all the key points, accuracy in reporting is crucial. For example, I am just mentioning few facts that are reflected in the report. In Dura, 6 years after the devastating earthquake, hundreds of women and children still live in tents, lacking proper housing and support. The claim about newly built schools is misleading. Many were EU-funded, and while state-funded schools remain unfinished. Thousands of children are forced into late afternoon shifts, creating hardship for working parents. In Tirana, despite high female representation in leadership, many directors are currently under investigation. Strengthening the independent role of civil society is critical to advocating for women's rights and economic inclusion. The COVID-19 crisis exacerbated economic instability for women all around the world. To address these challenges, we would recommend mandate pay transparency and enforce gender equality wages, ensure independence, civil society participation in economic policy making, improve access to credit and investment for women entrepreneurs, expand affordable childcare, strengthen gender-responsive budgeting for fair resource allocation. Women economic empowerment is not a woman issue, it's a priority. Equal participation would significantly boost GDP and economic stability. Now is the time for bold action and structural change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Katalin Cibor from European Conservatives.
Merci, Merci, Madame la Présidente, chers collègues.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, the number of male directors and company executives in Hungarian companies remain the majority, and yet we still have active participation on the part of women. Currently, 247,000 women are owners and authorized signatories that contribute to the functioning of commercial operations in Hungary. The figures are encouraging, however, they're far from ideal, it has to be said. In Hungary, there are many programs which have been in place for a long time. Many of them have been used to help women really take a full part in economic life. By way of an example, March 2024, the Women in Leadership Foundation was created in order to help Hungarian women and women in Central Europe and Eastern Europe, help them make progress in their leadership careers. Furthermore, a study has been drawn up regarding women in leadership roles. On the 15th of October 2024, we had a presentation of this report. It was an event that was organized in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Budapest. In addition to which, an online survey was conducted together with the airport of Budapest, and there we turned to young leadership figures, asking them about their career prospects and asking them also about the factors that contributed to their success or indeed hindered them from moving forward. These are just some examples. There are many other training programs and courses that are made available to women in Hungary, helping them broaden their knowledge, their entrepreneurship, helping them network as well, and helping them found and develop their own companies, their own businesses. Other initiatives are designed to help us identify models for success for women in leadership positions. I'm quite convinced that these efforts will continue to produce results. They will be more and more visible, and it will allow women in Hungary and in Central Europe play their full role in economic life, the place that they would like to occupy. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Sona Gazarian from ALDE Group.
Dear colleagues, it's an honor to stand here before you to address an issue of timeless relevance and urgent contemporary importance, the woman in the economy. I would like to extend my gratitude to the rapporteur for her commitment to advancing gender equality and publishing this very important report. Over the decades, women have made extraordinary strides in the economy. Women today lead corporations, shape innovative industries, and create transformative enterprises. Yet, we cannot ignore the stark realities we face today. Systematic barriers continue to hinder equal participation. Many women today still face discrimination in hiring practices, underrepresentation in decision-making processes, and a lack of opportunities in booming sectors like STEM. While it is clear that empowering women is a catalyst for economic growth, many nations still grapple with persistent wage gaps and limited access to capital for women entrepreneurs. The glass ceiling may have developed cracks, but it remains unbroken. The report we are discussing today offers the solution, and I would like to bring your attention to the solutions. One of them is a gender-responsive budgeting. This isn't merely an abstract concept, it's a practical framework for transformative changes. By consciously directing public resources, we can address the gender disparities at the source. Think about it. How can we expect women to excel in their careers if public budgets overlook crucial investment in childcare, maternity leave, and tailored upskilling programs? Gender-responsive budgeting illustrates that financial choices are moral choices. They are moral decisions, advocating for policies that are only uplifting individuals but enhance societies as a whole. Entrepreneurship is another cornerstone of the conversation. Women entrepreneurs are not just creating jobs, they are redefining industries and fostering innovation. Currently, only 2% of venture capital globally goes to the women-led startups. This is not merely an inequality, it's a missed opportunity that dampens potential and stifles progress. The report underscores a crucial truth. Achieving gender equality in the economy is not just a moral obligation, it's an economic necessity. So let's advocate together for policies that reflect women's realities, and let's ensure that every girl born today can grow up in the world where her potential is measured not by her gender, but her dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Sevilay Celenk Ozen from Unified European Left. The microphone is off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, first I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the rapporteur for her well-prepared and insightful report. The report's focus on empowering women's entrepreneurship and promoting gender-responsive budgeting at all levels is commendable. I also greatly value its emphasis on the mindset shift necessary to improve women's economic status and the call to address this challenge. Furthermore, the report rightly highlights PACE's stance that breaking glass ceilings and fixing the broken ranks for women's leadership requires collective commitment. However, as I read this report, authored by a member of my country's delegation, I cannot overlook the stark gap between the approach presented here and the reality of women in Turkey's social and economic life. This is not a problem unique to Turkey. It reflects a broader systemic issue that demands open discussion. As members of this international assembly, we must confront such contradictions and seek collective solutions. As come to Turkey, the government calls on women to have 3 children while offering little guidance or support for their economic survival. This approach puts front the family values over women's rights, marginalizing women within the family and excluding them from full participation in economic life. This persistent emphasis on Turkish family structure undermines efforts to prevent cultural traditions from maintaining inequality, which in turn hinders progress on women's rights. While gender budgeting is mentioned in Turkey's development plans, its meaningful implementation is sorely lacking. Even more concerning is the growing opposition to the concept of gender equality itself and the outright rejection of the term gender driven by the President Erdogan and the ruling party. Instead of promoting gender equality, the idea of gender justice is being advanced, a concept that weakens women's progress by embedding political ideologies into the discourse on women's rights. These issues are deeply concerning, and I believe they are critical to address within the context of this report. Thank you for your attention. I remain hopeful that meaningful change is possible through our shared efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we go to the list of speakers. We have 21 speakers on the list, and first is Christiana Erotokritou from Cyprus.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the rapporteur for her important work in preparing this report. Every effort aimed at advancing gender equality and a more inclusive job market must have gender budgeting at its core, thereby creating more diverse, resilient, and innovative economies. Gender budgeting has been on the agenda in several European countries and international organizations for some years now. Raising awareness on the important benefits of gender-responsive policies and ensuring that the issue remains on the agenda isn't, however, enough. What is imperative is consistent political will and resolve in addressing all forms of existing gender inequalities in state economies and labour markets. For this to happen, an intersectional and horizontal approach for gender budgeting across all sectors of the public and private domain at the national, regional and local levels must be pursued so that the different needs of women, as well as their specific experiences and priorities, are taken into consideration, ensuring at the same time that sufficient resources are allocated to this effect. Specific policies aimed at supporting women entrepreneurs, fair employment practices, equal pay and transparency in wages, measures to support the work-family balance, access to financial resources and promoting women leadership in all sectors of private and public life should constitute the cornerstone of our efforts in empowering women and cementing their pivotal role in the economy. Dear colleagues, the Council of Europe has demonstrated in practice its commitment to upholding the principles of equality and social justice. Equally important is that its member states step up efforts to reduce gender gaps and inequalities, particularly systemic inequalities. To this end, increased data availability as well as improvements in capacity building, training and expertise within government institutions and public services are necessary. We encourage national parliaments to disseminate best practices and share their experiences in successfully implementing gender budgeting initiatives and ensuring accountability through effective monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. Dear colleagues, as a woman in politics, I am acutely aware of the unique challenges and the structural barriers women face in accessing resources and opportunities. The complete and meaningful participation of women in all spheres of life must not be hindered by entrenched norms and biases of the past. I firmly believe that gender budgeting is not only about social justice, but also a strategic imperative for a peaceful, just and sustainable future. When women are empowered through equal opportunities, society as a whole benefits from their increased participation in all walks of life. It is high time that the Council of Europe member states be part of this momentum of change and change in mindsets so necessary for an equitable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I call Jessica Stegrud from Sweden.
Madame la Présidente, en lisant le rapport de Madame Silic-Canat.
Madam President, the report on the gender equality makes me think of the progress that we've made up to now in the West. 100 years ago, only 14 countries in the Council of Europe had given women the right to vote. Through the movement of the suffragettes, our societies developed. But the struggle is not over yet. Millions of women elsewhere are subject to appalling repression in Afghanistan. They're deprived of their fundamental rights. In Iran, their activism is being brutally repressed. This shows us how fragile the progress is that's been made. Even in Western Europe, the headway we've made is being threatened. There is a challenge to ensure that all the values can be properly shared. We need to emphasize the importance of integration. Equality ultimately means rights and equal opportunities, and not imposed results. Quotas ignore individual choices. Equality should strengthen freedom, but should not restrict it. Let's remain optimistic by showing courage, we can achieve a real level of equality. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President.
Thank you. And now I call Kadri Tali from Estonia. Okay, as she's not here, now Wanda Nowicka from Poland. The microphone is off. No? Not yet.
She has to.
You have to push once.
Okay. That was the trick. So, Madam Chair, unequal status of women in all societies, in all spheres of life, like economic, social, public, and cultural, is of systemic nature. It is due to patriarchal structure of our societies, still widespread in the world. And despite the fact that women are struggling against these barriers and achieved many successes like higher education. In Europe, in most countries, women are better educated than men. Still, their position, also in economical life, is much lower than this of men. And unfortunately, what plays against women is the fact the gender stereotypes about the roles of men and women in the societies are still of conservative and traditional nature, meaning that women are those who are primarily, sometimes only, responsible for all, not only for economic side of family, but also for child care or care of disabled members of in the families, disabled or elderly in the families. That, of course, is a serious barriers to women, and actually this triple burden is used against women in saying, for example, lower payments. The pay gap is still very strong. Also is being justified by the fact that women are those who have other things to do than just the professional career. So it shows that the issue with which we are struggling is not easy to be solved, although there are mechanisms and instruments adopted in different countries to overcome these barriers. For example, the European directive about reconciliation of family and work roles is meant to engage men more in family life, so that the burden of caregiving will not be only on women, but it will be equally shared by all partners in the family. This is, in theory, a good mechanism. So far yet, still is not efficient enough, since not many men are using this mechanism. They are not taking paternity leave. And anyway, I wanted to say that I do support this report because any mechanism we can adopt can play a positive role in improving situation of women in labor market. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Maria Petruszewska from North Macedonia.
Merci, Madame Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Congratulating the reporter on her excellent report. As stated in the previous resolution adopted by the Assembly, equality between women and men in the economy is a precondition for advancing in all other spheres of political and public life. Macroeconomic policy, health, education, and the living standards of people can improve if we consider the different needs of female and male citizens. Public expenditure may be more effective and more transparent if resources are allocated in a manner that the quality of opportunities is respected in the distribution of public resources and services. In our law on the national budget, we take into account the assessment of budget from a gender-responsive perspective. Parliamentarians have an important role to ensure equal rights of men and women. I would like to share the positive example of Parliamentary Women's Club that exists in our National Assembly. The Women's Club is an informal group in the parliament composed of all women members of the parliament, regardless of their party affiliation. The club acts in a common and unique goal to achieve gender equality and the promotion of women's rights through legal solution and active inclusion of women in the decision-making process. Cross-party cooperation is a model for which the Women Parliamentarians Club is recognized, has contributed to equal rights of women and men in the text of numerous laws. From increasing the participation of women in political life, in decision-making process, to improving the living conditions of women in rural areas, protection of the rights of single parents and female workers in case of pregnancy, to the promotion of equal rights of women and men in the labor market. I will conclude by quoting Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the first Jewish woman that served as a Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America. Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Zeynep Yildiz from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Esteemed colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to my dear friend, Ms. Çelik Kanat, for her exceptional work in producing this comprehensive report, which, following a detailed filed analysis, offers practical and well-considered solutions. In shaping both social and professional life, it is vital to bear in mind the fundamental principle that the well-being of individuals ultimately constitutes the well-being of society at large. This should serve as a key starting point for any discussions and actions on this matter. It is our fundamental responsibility to create an environment where women are not compelled to make a choice between their role as mother and their ambitions within their professional careers. From this perspective, women-responsive budgeting is a valuable tool. It ensures women's ability to make life decisions without the overwhelming pressure of economic constraints, thus empowering them to have true agency over their personal and professional lives. Furthermore, I consider it of great significance that the discrimination faced by women who wear headscarves in the workplace across Europe has been documented in this report under the auspices of the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. This serves as a stark reminder of the true purpose of this institution, to safeguard the rights and freedoms of all individuals. The report also highlights the systemic discrimination faced by women wearing headscarves in their professional life in Europe. A report of the European Commission published in 2020 shows that women with headscarves face significantly higher unemployment rates, with Muslim women experiencing unemployment rates 35% higher than their non-Muslim counterparts. This issue is even more pronounced in sectors with a strong corporate or public-facing element, where headscarf-wearing women often face exclusion or career hindrances. These statistics emphasize the urgent need to fight against discrimination. The report recognition of these challenges calls for implementation of inclusive and progressive policies to ensure equal opportunities for all women. It is now a necessity to articulate a new and realistic human rights paradigm that ensures women who have historically faced with the most severe labor exploitation to meet the surplus labor demands of savage capitalism can live free from economic coercion. This paradigm will allow them to remain women in truest sense without being forced to make a choice between their family and career, and to define their own priorities in life. Once again, I would like to express my appreciation to the rapporteur and to the committee for their unanimous approval of this report, which enables a more comprehensive consideration of human rights and human rights at large. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Olena Komenko from Ukraine, but I don't see the card is on. Okay, she's not here. Then Sibel Arslan from Switzerland. And your card is done?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, sehr geehrte
ladies and gentlemen, President, colleagues, allow me to speak in German. First of all, as a politician and as a woman, I'd like to thank the rapporteur for the excellent report. In the last years, we have seen a certain amount of development and achieved a level of gender equality, but it's all very fragile. The COVID-19 pandemic so showed us where the vulnerable points are and the issues of gender equality. There we saw a certain amount of backsliding. 50% of the population is deprived under these particular situation. It's not right. Women make less for the same work. They bear the burden of care, work, and domestic activities at home, which are not remunerated, and also, they frequently are overlooked in the decision-making processes. These structural inequalities are not only a failure at the ethical and moral level, but actually much more than that. So these particular points have been covered in the report. Now it's time to act. Equal pay for equal work, those ought not be simple words that are thrown out there, but it ought to be reality. Clarity as far as salaries, transparency, that has to all be there. More women in future-oriented jobs as well. Artificial intelligence, the green economy, these ought not be domains where men rule. Women are interested in these jobs, but they simply don't have those particular examples out there to follow. Those have to exist. We need the support of entrepreneurs as well, and the establishing, in other words, of enterprises as well, overcoming the various bureaucratic hurdles that exist. This has to all be facilitated. Also, of course, we need systems where care for children that would be shared, and this is something that's already being discussed in Switzerland, or in Switzerland as well. There's a broad agreement and alliance on this particular front, equal distribution of domestic burdens, of the family-related activities that have to be shared by both workers, both individuals, man and woman working. Gender budgeting has to be something which has to exist throughout, beginning in the household as well. We've heard that in Turkey things are going well, as we've heard from the rapporteur. Unfortunately, my information is quite the opposite. That is not the case, that in Turkey there are numerous examples of failures on this particular front. So it's actually something that we really have to work concertedly for. Let's work together to break through the various barriers that exist and create economies where women are not left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Sara Sofia Siren from Finland, but I don't see the card is on. Okay, so Lesia Zaburanna from Ukraine.
Hello. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the rapporteur for the great work. And actually, I would like to talk a little bit about this very important issue and very important problem in Europe. In today's changing global economy, gender equality is not just about fairness. It's essential for economic growth. All around the world, women's involvement in the workforce, access to business opportunities, and the adoption of gender-sensitive budgeting are helping shape the future of our economies. Despite the significant progress made in certain areas, women continue to face substantial barriers, be in the form of wage gaps, limited access to leadership roles, or the underrepresentation in critical sectors of the economy. However, in addition to these challenges, we must also acknowledge the profound impact of external factors, such as Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine. The Russian war of aggression hasn't only caused immense human suffering, but also deeply disrupted the economy, leading to significant shifts in the labor market. Amidst this ongoing conflict, women have increasingly taken on roles that were once largely out of reach, showcasing remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of extraordinary challenges. While the challenges remain considerable, the potential of transformative changes is equally vast. With many men enlisted in the military, women have stepped into traditional male-dominated sectors. The construction industry now employs twice as many women as it did in 2029. Similarly, the mining sector saw a rise, with women representing 49% of workers in 2023, compared to 27% 2 years prior. Currently, women occupy 34% of director positions in business, reflecting significant progress toward gender equality in decision-making. This shift is not only a step forward for women's empowerment, but also a positive sign of the broader efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in the country's business landscapes. Businesses are hiring more women and teenagers to address labor shortages by the war. Companies are revising recruitment criteria and offering more benefits to attract a diverse workspace. While we continue to work towards economic and social growth, we are simultaneously united in our commitment to protecting our sovereignty. These two processes strengthen our nation from within and defending it from external threats. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Gökçen from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, to be completely honest, when I read this report, two issues caught me by surprise. I will thank the rapporteur for one of them, and I will offer a critique on the other. First of all, violence against women is not limited to physical violence, it can also be economic. To strengthen the role of women in the economy, governments must take steps towards gender-responsive budgeting. The most powerful and yet most attacked instrument of the Council of Europe in combating all forms of violence against women is the Istanbul Convention. Turkey made great efforts to make the convention happen and for it to be called Istanbul. These efforts were made by its government, its opposition, its civil society, and Turkish feminists. It was also adopted by the Turkish parliament unanimously. At one night, by the signature of one man, Turkey withdrew from this very important instrument. And surprisingly, this report makes a clear and positive reference to Istanbul Convention. Instead of using the commonly known name, the official title has been used, despite being from a party of a government that withdrew from the Istanbul Convention. I find the rapporteur's reference meaningful. I would like to thank the rapporteur for this. And the second point, as you all know, gender and sex are very different concepts. In Turkey, the term gender was removed from all educational content in 2019 because it was considered to be against national values. Yet, the concept of gender is very well used throughout this report. In the memorandum of the report, there is a reference to Turkey Development Plan as a good example. I do not know how this is a good example when it never even mentions, not even once, the word gender. It only talks about equality of opportunities of women and men. Not equality, but equality of opportunity. And the same plan talks about, I'm quoting, global genderlessness trends and how this is a threat to Turkey. Dear colleagues, I do not express my criticism just to criticize, but this is an excellent example that shows how consistency is important. We work at the Assembly, we take decisions, we vote for reports for the people we represent. Then these texts should mean that we will change something back home. I hope the points made in this report are respected in member states, all member states, including my country. This is why I will vote in favor, and I thank Ms. Çelik for her work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Fleur Delis Osler from Canada. A microphone, please.
And now?
Perfect.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Dear colleagues, let me begin by thanking the rapporteur for her meaningful report, which unfortunately remains as relevant as ever. First, I would like to commend the goal of prioritizing inclusive approaches to diversity to challenge and dismantle pervasive stereotypes. Unlike Canada's neighbor to the south, we have strengthened and prioritized diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, in the elaboration of our federal policies, programs, and legislation. In 2015, the Canadian government renewed its 20-year-old commitment to use gender-based analysis plus, so that it can be more inclusive in its approach to developing, delivering, and evaluating initiatives. When women work, economies grow. Women's economic empowerment increases economic diversification, boosts shared prosperity, and is good for business. But to achieve this, women and girls in all their dimensions need education, upskilling, full control of their reproductive rights, and an end to gender-based violence. As the rapporteur points out, we need to address one of the greatest challenges in establishing women's place in the economy, which is changing mindsets. One of the measures in the report is the establishment of gender-responsive budgeting practices and tools to ensure that government budgets, policies, and programs pay specific attention to the needs and priorities of women. Canada continues to believe in equity practices and tools. Last year, we established funding for an affordable, Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, including before and after school care, to support the well-being of children and families, gender equality, and the rights of women to participate in the economy. In December 2018, the Canadian Gender Budgeting Act entered into force, committing the Government of Canada to strengthen its financial administration by ensuring gender and diversity is considered in budgetary decisions. To this end, Canadian law requires that all measures adopted are formulated using a gender-based plus approach. We've also taken initiatives to recognize that the full and equal participation of women in the economy is essential to competitiveness and prosperity. In February 2024, Canada announced funding to support the project, Changing the Narrative, Unleashing the Full Potential of Women-Owned Enterprises, which aims to foster innovation, enhance workforce diversity, and tackle systemic barriers experienced by women entrepreneurs. The resolution points out there is still a long way to go, and unfortunately, we are bearing witness to multiple global examples of equality backsliding. I, for one, pledge to continue to put the rights and full economic participation of women in all their dimensions at the forefront of my work as a parliamentarian. Thank you for your attention. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you. I give the floor to Aysu Bankoglu from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam President. And I would like to first say thank you to Ms. Çelik Kanat for her compassionate report, but we would appreciate if she put effort to advocate these ideas before her colleagues in Turkey. Gender-responsive budgeting is a gender equality strategy based on how public resources are collected and allocated with three phases: budget preparation, implementation, and audit. All stakeholders should be involved through these phases, and gender disaggregated data needs to be transparent. In Turkey, however, these gender-responsive budget strategies, which are expected to be in practice since 2014, remain only on paper and toothless. The budget allocation for women's policies has been consistently reduced over the years, while substantial resources have been directed towards family policies. In the latest budget, €454 million was allocated to family policies, whereas only a third of that amount was designated for women's policies. Last week, 2025, was announced as a year of the family by the presidency, emphasizing conservative policies on marriage and fertility. Considering the exclusionist family definition of the government, we are critical of these overarching policies, threatening mainly women who do not conform to the prescribed family model of the government. Limited public expenditure addressing gender inequalities over the years and persistent ignorance of issues such as women's unemployment, a high female proportion need, and insufficient childcare services are only pieces of unfortunate evidence of our critics. On the top of that, the rise in violence against women, especially in family institutions, has not been addressed by the government. Dear colleagues, gender-responsive budgeting is not only a financial process. It requires fundamental political support with an explicit emphasis on gender equality and women's rights. Right populist governments encourage women to adhere to patriarchal roles and reinforce traditional family structures, significantly intervening in women's autonomy. This inconsistency under right populist regimes depreciates any implementation efforts for GRB strategies. So, for effective and encompassing gender-responsive budgeting policies, yes, we need accountable and transparent governments. And yes, the report is highlighting this. However, sincere and consistent political discourse is needed to get to the heart of the matter to achieve de facto implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Santi Montemayor Castillo from Mexico.
Hi, I'm Santi Montemayor from Cancun, Mexico. Buen día, saludos.
Good morning, good afternoon rather, and I'd like to thank all for this wonderful work that's been done, and of course the conclusions of the deliberations always serve many in a positive fashion. The issue of the participation of women in economy is what's being touched upon here, taking into consideration gender parity on numerous different facets of society. Today, it's almost imaginable where there would be areas where women are not present in the economy in different sectors. Nonetheless, it's necessary to bolster the participation of women with a legislative framework. In Mexico, a number of different studies have been conducted of only 4 out of 10 women participate in activities. Men, much more so, of course. So, indeed, women are in a very, very negative position, if you like, particularly compared to other countries, and also compared to other countries in Latin America, Colombia and Brazil, for example. Last year, the United Nations pointed out that the salary gap is extremely large, huge in other words, and that women are making much less than men for the same job. And indeed, there are sectoral differences, but nonetheless, the problem is pervasive and throughout. Inequality exists out there. Certain major advances have been made as far as human rights, economic rights, social rights, but women's rights continues to be something which is neglected. And in Mexico, this is a problem, irrespective of the fact that we have the first woman president in our country. Nonetheless, the Congress, the Senate, are for the most part dominated by men. And that shows us that there's a lot that needs to be done, that the quota system hasn't effectively solved the problem that exists. And indeed, we have to understand that to be able to move forward with effective policies, that women have to be present there to forge those policies as well, along with men. So it's not only an issue of an abstract question of rights. It's a tangible issue which involves the daily life of individuals and affects their economic, socio-economic status and position as well. So rights for women is something that has to be focused on, perpetually, on an ongoing basis. We need a system of surveillance. And indeed, the figures in Mexico, whatever figures that we have right now, and whatever success that has been achieved, is the result of a concerted effort which peters out on occasion. So we have to continue to work together. We have to draw from the experience, from your experience here as well, in order to be able to achieve what has been so wonderfully achieved in the countries that have been successful on this front in Europe. Thank you very much.
Now, Abdurrahman Babakan from Turkey, the first and the last man in this debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. I welcome this report and congratulate Ms. Çelik-Kanat for her excellent work. I am very happy to be taking part in this discussion, as I am well aware of the role men have in furthering the place of women in economy. Any issue concerning women, in fact, concerns the whole of society. Recent studies show that women's participation in economic activity positively affects children's well-being and development, increase growth, reduce poverty, and improve household well-being. However, women's economic empowerment is not a single-faceted issue that could easily be solved through economic measures. One of the most damaging obstacles to women's economic empowerment is the intersectional discriminations they face. One overlooked example is discrimination towards Muslim women in Europe, specifically. In European societies that pride themselves on principles of equality and human rights, the treatment on Muslim women often tells us a different story. Across Europe, Muslim women routinely face prejudice, marginalization, and systemic barriers simply for choosing to practice their faith. They are scrutinized for how they dress, whether wearing the hijab, niqab, or other religious attire. Workplaces are no exception. Muslim women are disproportionately excluded from employment opportunities due to stereotypes and outright discrimination. Studies consistently show that a Muslim woman's chance of being called for a job interview drops significantly when her name or appearance suggests her faith. This not only undermines her economic empowerment, but also perpetuates damaging cycles of marginalization. In public spaces, too, the discrimination is palpable. Hate crimes against visibly Muslim women, including verbal abuse and physical attacks, are alarmingly frequent. Legislative measures such as bans on headscarves in schools or government offices serve to institutionalize Islamophobia and restrict personal freedoms. In order to uphold all women, regardless of their faith, dress, or religion, we must enforce anti-discrimination laws, promote diversity, and support education and economic access. Only when we invite all women to the table, we can ensure that the women have their right place in the economy and social life. In this context, the recommendations of the resolution regarding both the specific title and women's participation in economic activity in general, and the inferences and analyses based on the objective data are quite remarkable. Thanks for the reporter. Thanks all.
Thank you. And now I call Valérie Piller-Carrard from Switzerland.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Vice President. Colleagues, I'd like first of all to thank our colleague Senator Çelik-Kanat for drafting this very important report, which is aimed to strengthen the role of women in the economy. Given the number of male speakers in this debate, I'd like to thank Mr. Babakan for speaking just now. He's the only male speaker in this debate. I think we can conclude that there's still a huge amount that needs to be done for us to change the mindset and for us to ensure that we have a proper role to play in the economy. So the last time the Assembly addressed the issue of women's role in the economy was in 2018 with a report that was entitled Empowering Women in the Economy, and this gave rise to a resolution. Since then, the world has experienced the COVID pandemic with all its negative consequences, which continue to be felt now. The economic consequences of conflicts have already brought into sharp relief how fragile the progress is in terms of gender equality and how much still needs to be done. More so than men, women have to face discrimination and are also penalized by gender bias. When undergoing recruitment procedures, they have to prove their capabilities much more so than their male counterparts. Not only are they the frontline caregivers for loved ones, but this heavy responsibility imposed on them means that they're being considered as being less efficient from an economic point of view and therefore discriminated against in the job market. This report calls on European leaders to overcome the challenge to change mindsets so that women can be acknowledged for their true worth and they stop being underrepresented in the higher education related to science, technology, engineering or mathematics. Now, this sector offers far better job opportunities than the sectors in which women outnumber men. Major headway has been made in two fields, according to a study carried out by the OECD in 2023, in the distribution of childcare responsibilities and when it comes to transparency, in particular with regard to the gender pay gap, sorry. In 55% of 37 member states of the OECD, private businesses now have to report on these gender pay gaps, and this is certainly a very positive headway, but it's not enough. Despite this progress to advance gender equality, equality is still fragile. Women still are the main caregivers, even though there's a blatant lack of financial acknowledgement for this type of work, both with regard to work at home as well as work in institutions. In addition to this, how slow this progress is, there's a risk of a reversal of progress, in particular against the current backdrop. We need to take better account of research that shows the economic potential of women and take more measures to step up change, especially in the period that we're currently experiencing with a lack of qualified workers. We know that one of the obstacles that's impeding women's career development is far too often having children. It's certainly not normal for women to be laid off when they're about to have their first child. This is discrimination that we can't stand for in 2025. We need to put into place genuine family policies in our states to promote the reconciling the family and professional life, develop high-quality childcare facilities and at an affordable price and enough in number, and also introduce parental leave. Colleagues, let us overcome the challenge to change mindsets and let's support the report. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now I give the floor to Jurgita Sukevičienė from Lithuania.
Thank you, Madam President. As representatives of our nations, we stand here not only as policymakers, but as advocates for a fairer, more equitable future. The Parliamentary Assembly has long been a beacon for advancing human rights and equality. Yet we must recognize that the journey toward economic gender equality remains fraught with challenges. Gender equality is not just about fairness, it's an economic imperative. Women contribute significantly to our economies, yet they are often underutilized and undervalued. This session comes to a critical juncture. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the vulnerabilities of women in the workforce, while global conflicts have further strained the economic opportunities. Now more than ever, we must act with determination to ensure women have equal opportunities to thrive economically. Lithuania has taken significant strides in promoting gender equality through progressive parental leave policies. Recent reforms encourage shared caregiving responsibilities, reducing the burden of women and enabling them to remain active in the workforce. These policies not only benefit families, but also set a precedent for other nations, demonstrating that equitable parenting is both possible and beneficial for society. The Lithuanian Parliament has played a key role in shaping and enacting these reforms. Legislators continue to monitor their impact and refine them based on outcomes. Sharing Lithuania's policies through PACE can inspire other nations to adopt similar measures, fostering regional harmony in gender equality. Furthermore, Lithuania has introduced initiatives to support women entrepreneurs, such as simplified grant application processes and targeted funding for startups. Lithuanian women are increasingly taking on roles in the green and digital economies, aligning with global trends. These sectors represent the future of work, and women's participation is crucial for ensuring inclusive and sustainable development. Economic empowerment is not charity. It is a smart investment in Europe's future, as stated in PACE discussions. Empowering women is just not a matter of equality, but a proven driver of societal and economical progress. Lithuania stands ready to lead by example, working collaboratively with other nations to ensure that women's contributions are fully recognized and utilized. Together, we can build a future where gender equality is not just a goal, but a reality. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Pelin Ilik from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I would like to congratulate the rapporteur for her excellent work and for this wonderful report. The report successfully addresses women's place in the economy and subsequently explores how gender-responsive budgeting could be an answer in coping with the existing gender inequalities in many areas of life. More importantly, budget expenditures are generally and incorrectly regarded as gender-neutral documents. The report reviews the budgetary processes and public expenditures from the gender perspective and thus shows that budgets and public services affect women and men differently and more often compound existing gender inequality. In this regard, GRB is a perfect tool to ensure that public expenditures and services are distributed in a gender equitable fashion. This would promote equality and contribute to equal opportunities for both women and men. As revealed in the report, a number of member states have undertaken reforms in this direction. Although these are encouraging steps, we are still far behind establishing common standards for GRB and thus achieving equitable distribution of expenditures. In this context, I should also like to emphasize that women's participation in budgetary decision-making process is key. Fiscal policies and generally male-dominating areas. Creating a gender balance would contribute to a more gender-sensitive budgetary processes. While anti-discrimination laws have been enforced for long years in member states, women still continue to face various forms of discrimination and persisting gender inequalities. Gender equality must be achieved in practice too. Discrimination and existing inequalities manifest themselves more visibly in women's employment, gender to pay gap, and women's advancement to managerial positions. I would like to conclude by emphasizing that GRB and women's place in the economy must be constantly addressed and monitored in this Assembly. Because we know that achieving equality in practice is a complex and fragile matter, which is prone to setbacks. Lastly, I wish more male parliamentarians would pay attention to this report and talk about the issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pelin. And now Meryem Güka from Turkey.
Thank you. Dear President and colleagues, as a parliamentarian with roots in grassroots politics, advancing women's involvement in economic life has always been deeply important to me. I would like to begin by commending my esteemed colleague Sena for her exceptional work on this report. Turkey places utmost importance on empowering women and ensuring their rightful place in all aspects of life. Economic empowerment is not merely a policy choice for us, it's a transformative strategy. So policies such as tax incentives for companies hiring women, flexible working models, maternity benefits, the expansion of childcare services, and neighborhood daycare centers have supported this progress. These measures have enabled countless women to balance family responsibilities and professional ambitions, contributing actively to the workforce. Initiatives like Women Entrepreneur Support Program have provided thousands of women with funding, mentorship, and training, empowering them to establish businesses that drive growth and inspire communities. Turkey has integrated gender-responsive budgeting into its public spending, ensuring policies consider the women's needs and is recognized by the OECD as one of 23 countries implementing this approach. This strategy has improved access to healthcare, education, and job opportunities, particularly for women in rural regions. Over the years, we have launched numerous programs to support women in resuming and completing their education, fostering a generation of empowered and educated women. The STEM-focused Turkish Engineer Girls project stands out as an important example supporting female students aspiring to become engineers. Tailored programs for women provide access to education, vocational training, and entrepreneurial resources, ensuring that no woman is left behind. While we take pride in these significant achievements in Turkey, as part of the Turkish diaspora, I have witnessed firsthand the struggles faced by Muslim women across Europe. As stated in the report, these women often encounter a triple penalty in the labor market, being women, belonging to a minority, and being Muslim. Despite their qualifications and potential, they are frequently excluded from opportunities and stigmatized due to biases tied to their identity. In some cases, Muslim women are even dismissed from their jobs simply for choosing to wear a headscarf, highlighting the persistence of deeply rooted prejudices. Addressing these challenges requires more than just legal reforms. We all together must actively work to dismantle stereotypes and systemic barriers. Ready to share and learn, we strive for a world where every woman can contribute, lead, and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the list of speakers. And now I give the floor to Ms. Çelik Kanat. You have 3 minutes.
I would like to thank all my colleagues for their constructive and insightful contributions, which demonstrate our shared commitment to gender equality. The discussion has highlighted progress in some areas while reaffirming how much work remains to be done. It has also confirmed the importance of implementing the recommendations in the resolution. I would also like to express my gratitude to the Secretariat, in particular Penelope, for their invaluable support in preparing this report. Some colleagues highlighted the often neglected issue of discrimination against Muslim women in the labor market, one of the most economically disadvantaged groups in Europe. My report references research showing that Muslim women in Europe are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than women generally due to a triple penalty: being woman, being from an ethnic minority, and being Muslim. Reports of Muslim women being denied employment or dismissed for refusing to remove their headscarves are deeply concerning and demonstrate the disproportionate impact of anti-Muslim racism on Muslim women, which must be addressed. As highlighted in the resolution, member states must take decisive action to eliminate and sanction racism, intolerance, and intersectional discrimination against women from all diverse groups in the labor market. We have also heard good practices from my country, Turkey, one of the 23 OECD countries that have implemented gender-responsive budgeting. The section on Turkey in the report is based entirely on the information I received during my exchanges with UN Women. The constructive cooperation between the Turkish government and UN Women has yielded positive results, with further efforts underway to advance the system. I will not respond to certain comments on Turkey, as they fall entirely outside the scope of my report and pertain to domestic politics, but I would like to stress that the importance given to women and the family are not contradictory. In fact, they are complementary. In this respect, I am proud of our government for supporting women and families and support all future advances in this respect. Dear colleagues, I would like to emphasize that I have continuously advocated for all recommendations in this resolution in my country during my 10-year mandate as a parliamentarian. Most importantly, while proposing and implementing legislation and policies, we as parliamentarians and leaders of opinion must tackle the greatest challenge of all, changing the mindsets. Our societies must move beyond persistent stereotypes and cliches and uphold glass ceilings and broken rungs, preventing women from advancing in the economy. I began with figures and I will close with them. Empowering women strengthens entire economies. According to the World Bank, closing the gender gap could increase global GDP per capita nearly 20% and generate 5 to 6 trillion in economic gains if women started businesses at the same rate as men. The evidence is clear. Women's full economic empowerment benefits all of society. Men and boys must take an active role in changing perceptions and, above all, be convinced themselves that the whole society benefits from this win-win situation rather than perceiving it as competition. In this context, I would like to also thank Mr. Babacan for being the only man who contributed to this discussion. I hope you will not adopt this resolution. You will not only adopt this resolution unanimously, but also take its recommendations back with you to finally achieve economic equality and unlock the full potential that comes with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Mrs. Maria Mezencewa-Fedorenko. You have 3 minutes.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący. Dear Sena, teşekkürler for this important report. You know, colleagues, we were just laughing that there was one man speaking. This is not funny. But the even more not funny is that we're still debating and discussing, and there's still a need for such resolutions to enhance, enlarge, and higher up the understanding of how underrepresented women are still in the global economic market, even though, as the rapporteur has mentioned, us women were more than half of this planet Earth. Well, we'll see what happens further with AI and other technologies, but currently in this file, there are several very concrete proposals to our governments to undertake after we, I hope, all vote in favor. First one, colleagues, this is gender budgeting. And I do know that many ministers still don't understand what means gender, what means budgeting, and altogether is a total mix of things for them. But it's not only about them. It also takes us to the very downground of grassroots of diplomacy, where gender budgeting is coming from, where division of budgeting is coming from, so that we do look as directly representative members of parliaments and people, how do we actually spend this budget? On what do we spend this budget? Are we taking care about parents, in general parental leave at the workplaces? Do we actually assess somehow in the global data the unpaid work, as it's stated in 10.3, I think, 10.4, I think. So the real-time challenges put us through this timely proposals conducted by the rapporteur, and I know that she used an amazing database of herself collecting by the opportunity of questionnaire she has shared with us at the very beginning of her report to share how the national parliaments of the Council of Europe are conducting at least the gender budgeting. Colleagues, we have discussed with you the importance of education history. Today we should pay attention to curriculum in general. How are the stereotypes are spread, even from the kindergarten and schools, and then further to universities, when girls, ladies, and then women are deciding their future upon their professions, how they may be misled by the different stereotypes. I hope all of them will vanish and women power will be genuinely prevailed and assessed also at the workplaces in equal pay and many other benefits. Thank you, and I highly ask to support this report and maybe give a little time so the room will be filled up with MPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed. The Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination has presented a draft resolution to which 5 amendments have been tabled. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 2, 3, 4 and 5 to the draft resolution which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority be declared as definitely rejected. Is that so, Ms. Mezentseva Fedorenko?
Yes, President.
Thank you. If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be rejected. Is there any objection? No. Amendments 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the draft resolutions are rejected and will not be called. Okay, now I call Ms. Petra Bayir to support amendment number 1. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you very much. We think that keeping women away from the labor market by paying them for staying at home is not in the spirit and not in line with this report, and so we suggest to delete this paragraph 12.6. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else wish to support this amendment? No. Okay. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Sorry. No. What is the view of the committee? Mrs. Chairwoman, sorry.
Dear President, the committee hasn't taken any position on that, so we have to consider it in the plenary hall. Thank you.
And what is the view of the rapporteur?
Dear Chairman, dear colleagues, I have included this recommendation in the resolution in order to support women who undertake childcare, elderly care, disability care, in the absence of sufficient, let's say, employment opportunities or sufficient childcare infrastructure. So this concerns more the disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged families, and supporting them. However, I do also see the point that my colleague Petra Bayer is making, which is relevant in countries which are above a certain development level, that these serving as disincentives for women. Therefore, I would like, I would very much like to keep my text, but I would like to leave it to my colleagues to decide how to vote, and considering the context of their own countries, especially considering the importance of social protection and social security coverage for everyone, including people who are involved in unpaid care work. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. Okay. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. 34 for the amendment, 24 against, 12 abstentions. It was accepted, agreed, yes. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 16068 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. 63 in favor, 2 against, 5 abstentions. The draft resolution is adopted. Congratulations. Okay, thank you. And 1 minute break, and there will be the next point of the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. We are about to start the second and our last debate today. But before that, a colleague wishes to make a point of order. Order, please. Order, please. There is a speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was going to say yes at previous resolution, but wrongly I pressed no. I would share it with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will be noted. Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, the next item of business this afternoon is the debate on the report titled Regulating Content Moderation on Social Media to Safeguard Freedom of Expression, document 16089, presented by Ms. Valentina Grippo on behalf of the Committee of Culture, Science, Education and Media. I call Ms. Valentina Grippo, the rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes to reply at the end of the debate. You need your card.
Can you, yeah.
President, ladies and gentlemen, today we are presenting a report that addresses a very complex challenge of our time. That means regulating content moderation on digital platforms. Now, Mark Zuckerberg promised more speech and fewer errors recently in Meta services, and all of that with a fact-checker change in the system overall. The same as far as Google and YouTube. Now, we can only oppose these types of decisions because it may lead to the proliferation of fake information. The intention is to prioritize enforcement on illegal and high severity, if you like, violations, for example, goes in the direction of correcting excesses that can result as far as content. Now, what we're speaking about is a delicate balance between two fundamental principles. On the one hand, responsibility of platforms to make sure that online content doesn't violate fundamental rights, and on the other hand, the need to prevent moderation tools from being used in an arbitrary fashion, compromising freedom of expression. We know that in today's digital context, a simple bot or algorithm can be used to defame persons, violate children's rights, foment hatred, etc. Those who own and manage a communication empire with the ability to shape global public opinion cannot exempt themselves from this particular responsibility for what happens in this particular space. At the same time, we don't want some sort of arbitrary censorship instrument or weapon. Platforms have the right and duty to take action against harmful content, but they must do so in a transparent and auditable fashion. And let's not forget that frequently there's a lack of clarity overall. And it also happens, we've seen in numerous different issues around us. For example, the war in the Ukraine, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the U.S. elections, the assault on Capitol Hill, Black Lives Matter in 2020, and numerous other such occasions where the platforms have been accused of moving in a non-neutral fashion and promoting and addressing certain approaches and certain ideas which may not be palatable and which may be unacceptable in certain environments. So it's absolutely necessary to look very closely at different automated tools use these in a moderated fashion, and be very, very careful in general and reticent. In any case, whether by accident or by project, removal of content or suspension of user content is something that has to be taken into consideration very clearly. Let's not forget that freedom of expression is not an absolute right, and social media have a legal obligation to remove illegal content from their services. In addition, social media companies also hold fundamental rights such as the property rights and the freedom to conduct business, that particular right as well. This means that they are free to determine to a certain extent how users can use their services. On the other hand, however, these terms and conditions establish an unequal relationship between service providers and users. We're dealing with this particular issue in this particular report. What we've tried to do is trying to find practices. We want to find some sort of fashion that we can work effectively in this particular environment, taking into consideration the numerous situations that exist, the economic factors as well, very important from a concrete point of view. We have to have accessible, clear information, and we have to have an ability to be able to analyze that information, to examine as to the validity of the information as well. And I do feel that the terms and conditions must be acceptable, clear, inform users effectively, and when content is moderated, the user who posts it must be notified without delay and receive adequate explanation, avoiding any sort of, if you like, sneaky practices or what's known as shadow banning. Also, let's not forget that not all content is created equal. Content provided for the press or television stations is already regulated to a considerable extent and cannot be moderated like other types of content. Social media services have to inform newspapers and television stations as to the source of their content as well. Now, another type of content that requires specific treatment involves video shots, war zones. Such videos may serve as evidence in courts of law, war crimes courts as well, and this permanent deleting of information from social media may, to a certain extent, undermine their work, because the information is simply disappears altogether. Content moderation is increasingly done in an automatic fashion. Artificial intelligence tools are used. They are more efficient than human moderators at analyzing huge amounts of content circulating on the web. But what artificial intelligence can't do is fully understand the subtleties. Also, independent organizations have a very important role to play on this particular front. Human moderators must remain, of course, the cornerstone of any content moderation, along with artificial intelligence. But let's not forget that the human factor is partial in nature. That's why we need to set a clear and comprehensive set of standards on this particular front. Now, I hope that you'll be able to support the particular approaches that have been introduced in this report. I do feel it is a way to provide a more measured analysis of content. Thank you very much.
The speakers on behalf of the political groups, Mr. Benjamin Daly on behalf of the EPP-CD. You have 3 minutes.
Dear President, dear colleagues, it's a great honor for me for the first time to speak before this assembly about a human right which is so fundamental. Freedom of expression indeed is a cornerstone of our democracies. Without it, there's no open debate, no rule of law, and no real democratic participation. In today's digital society, social media play a crucial role in public discourse. They connect people, amplify voices, and provide access to diverse sources of information. However, with power comes responsibility. Social media companies have a dual obligation. First, they must, of course, respect freedom of expression. They must ensure that their platforms remain open spaces for democratic debate. This means that social media companies must refrain from arbitrary content removal, shadow banning, or algorithmic suppression of lawful content. Their moderation policies must be transparent, non-discriminatory, and subject to due process. Second, they must take responsibility for limiting the spread of harmful content. While freedom of expression is fundamental, it does not mean an unrestricted right to spread disinformation, incite hatred, or promote violence. The principle is very clear. What is illegal in the physical world must also be illegal online. Hate speech and incitement to violence have no place in our societies, whether in the streets or on our screens. At the same time, we must acknowledge the risk posed by disinformation. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for the spread of disinformation, threatening democratic processes, human rights, and public trust. Censorship, dear colleagues, is not the answer, but promoting accurate, verified, and reliable information is the answer. That is why we believe that our amendment on collaboration with fact-checkers and journalists is essential. Finally, regulation must strike the right balance. It must protect free speech while ensuring that social media do not become a breeding ground for harm. And above all, dear colleagues, we must ensure that social media companies do not become the ultimate arbiters of truth. Content moderation should not be dictated by private companies, but must be guided by democratic institutions. Our responsibility is clear. We must ensure a free, open, and responsible digital environment where fundamental rights are respected. We thank the rapporteur for her work, and of course, we will support this resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Pavel Jablonski on behalf of the ECDA. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, and most of all, the citizens of European countries, because it is about you and not about these politicians here, let it be said very clearly, freedom of speech is under attack. And the spectre is haunting Europe today, a spectre of censorship. This censorship is disguised sometimes as protection from hatred, from populism, from so-called hate speech, but in reality, it's about power, it's about control. Left-wing politicians want to control what you say, what you write on the internet, how you think, how you vote, and if you do not fulfill with their demands, they want to punish you. If you say, for example, that there are only 2 genders, they say it's hate speech. If you say that children should not be subjected to transgender surgeries, they call it incitement of violence, and they want it censored. This is why they are acting so aggressively against internet platforms, against social media, against the platform X, against Facebook new moderation policy, against TikTok, against other platforms. This is about control. What we had in Poland prior to 1989 was absolutely, undoubtedly censorship. There was a law that allowed the government officials to remove, to block any content that they deemed illegal, that they deemed to be somehow harmful. And then the citizens could appeal to the court of law. Well, obviously they could have done so, but in reality nobody in the right mind could consider this to be in line with the convention, with Article 10 of the convention. Everybody understood somehow that this is censorship. And yet, again, somehow regulations as such are being prepared, are being drafted, are being introduced all across Europe. And we here in this assembly, our first and utmost duty is to safeguard basic human rights, including the right to freedom of speech, to freedom of expression. We have drafted several amendments to this resolution. The resolution isn't very bad, but it lacks concrete means how to stop censorship. First and foremost, I agree with my colleagues that if something is illegal in the real world, it should also be illegal in the internet. But if something is legal in the real world, it should never be removed, it should never be censored without prior judicial control. And this is the reality right now, that the governments, by virtue of administrative decisions, want to remove content, want to censor content, and people are left without proper means of remedy. If we give simple appeal, this will require lots of time for the proceeding to be concluded. So in fact, we will have the basic problem: justice delayed is justice denied. So I call upon you, dear colleagues, let us fight censorship together, and let's improve this resolution by adding these important amendments.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Madame Fresco Rolfo on behalf of ALDE.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President. Even though it's complex, the subject that we're discussing today is hugely important. How can we balance moderating speech and respecting democratic values, taking on board the fact that the digital world has become a key sphere for public debate, even though it is subject to abuses that we cannot overlook? This debate is taking place at a time when several platforms have decided to put an end to content moderation, and this can, of course, cause a spark or spark a surge in hate speech and give greater visibility to the darker side of our societies. This having been said, with regard to the regulation of platforms, it's solely under the auspices of the private multinational firms which define these regulations and apply them based on their own interest. Furthermore, how can we not be worried about the fact that some private interests can promote one view alone on their networks, can make use of disinformation, and can have the potential to influence election results, which means that they fully lose their democratic essence? We have one recent example of this. Self-regulation can therefore not guarantee the freedom of expression nor the protection of users from illegal or harmful content. Our responsibility is to set up an institutional framework which ensures that the digital world does not attempt to silence dissenting opinion, does not become a law-free zone in which views cannot be expressed, or in which, in fact, abuses are tolerated. In accordance with Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, any restriction to the freedom of expression should be necessary, proportionate and justified. It's therefore of vital importance to guarantee the transparency of decision-making processes and to enable citizens to have effective remedies if their rights have been violated. As I'm sure you've understood, coordination is a key area and strategic area too. Currently, there are diverging rules in member states and they're creating confusion for companies and citizens. But regulation itself is not enough. Its application needs to be thorough and fair with clear mechanisms to be able to challenge arbitrary decisions made by platforms. ALDE would like to express its support for the rapporteur for the quality of the proposals in this report, which represent a solid foundation for making headway on this subject. We would like to emphasize one key point. Content that's taken down, including the metadata, should not be completely deleted because this content may represent key evidence for documenting serious crimes or war crimes. If they were to be wiped, this would deprive victims and justice of key means for establishing the truth and ensuring accountability. Similarly, it's of vital importance for users to be able to challenge decisions taken by platforms. Far too often, citizens find themselves confronted with a lack of clarity and inaccessible appeals procedures when the content is moderated by a platform or an account that's been suspended. We need to guarantee clear, predictable and fair procedures. Moreover, we cannot ignore the new challenges posed by artificial intelligence technology. AI-generated content, which sometimes can't be discerned from reality, causes brand new problems related to disinformation and manipulation. Solutions such as digital watermarks to authenticate content should be explored and improved. I really must also mention the importance of ensuring that the proper mental health is guaranteed to people working on content moderation. It's all about human dignity. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Mr. Brendan Ozturk on behalf of the UEL. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the rapporteur for the comprehensive report regulating content moderation on social media to safeguard freedom of expression. It looks in detail at the responsibility of the social media platforms to protect freedom of expression and recognizes their influence on social behavior, democratic processes, and the flow of information. The report highlights critical issues such as algorithmic bias, disinformation, content removal, access restrictions, and platform prioritization. However, it could also examine the risk of bias and or politically influenced decisions by social media companies, which are often influenced by government pressure. For example, platforms such as X, owned by Elon Musk, openly display their political bias, raising concerns about their role in shaping public discourse. Importantly, while states must protect citizens from the actions of social media companies, they must also protect freedom of expressions from their own interference. In Turkey, conventional mainstream media is heavily controlled by pro-government AKP interests, forcing citizens to rely on social media, which has increasingly come under the state control. For instance, a 2020 law on social media imposes strict obligations on platforms such as Facebook and TikTok, with heavy penalties for non-compliance. The Disinformation Act of 2022 criminalizes the publicly dissemination of misleading information and has led to investigations against at least 56 journalists in 2 years. They are either mostly Kurdish journalists or employees of the media outlets that maintain a publishing approach sensitive to the Kurdish issue. The accusations are often vague and range from military-related reporting to reporting on natural disasters. Social media platforms have been fined under broad accusations such as terror propaganda or incitement to hatred. Recently, for example, the Istanbul Chief Public Prosecutor's Office filed a lawsuit against the Istanbul Bar Association for publishing a social media post about the murder of two journalists, Nazım Daştan and Cihan Bilgin, by an armed drone in Rojava. The lawsuit demands their removal and the election of new members. Finally, slap lawsuits remain a significant obstacle to press freedom in Turkey. Both social media companies and states must act to protect freedom of expressions in an increasingly restricted digital space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker, Mr. Joan Blikra from the SOC.
Thank you. The way we communicate with each other and how we spread messages and forward statements from others is in constant change. Without rules and regulations, we will have anarchy. The activity on social media is regulated by the content moderation rules, include in social media's companies' terms and conditions. It's a challenge that these rules can be different from company to company, and users are bound to them on a take-it-or-leave-it basis. Another challenge, as the rapporteur mentioned, is that content moderation is increasingly carried out by automated means. Of course, it's more efficient, but artificial intelligence is not human. Artificial intelligence has problems understanding humor, parody, and satire. Social media companies have a say in how the users can use the services and what content they can post. There are examples of challenges concerning regulation of social media. On one hand, we need regulation. On the other hand, we must secure freedom of expression. The report is a professional and important report, and it describes the dilemmas. It gives us an excellent update as of today. The most important is, though, all recommendations and the call to member states of the Council of Europe to inquire and promote several measures. The report is not the only one in the topic of social media, communication and fake news, but will strengthen the work to safeguard freedom of expression.
Thank you very much. That completes the main political contributions, and we now get on to the wider debate. And the first person to be called is Mr. Francisco Verducci.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, this report, in my view, introduces two issues that are not only conflicting in nature, but are necessary one for the other. In other words, regulation for platforms, but at the same time bolster freedom and liberty, freedom of speech, but make sure that this freedom of expression does not negate or undermine the freedom of expression of others. Now, as far as hate speech, which cannot be justified under any circumstance, it is not a liberty, it is not a right, and it negates, it undermines, if you like, the freedom of others. It cannot be accepted. It is not a real democratic liberty. It is something that undermines, once again. Now, private property, these platforms like X, Meta, TikTok, Google, are exercising in unlimited, absolute media, economic power, commercial power, which, of course, has to be submitted to certain regulations, and it requires careful conditioning. Otherwise, it will be a huge interest, if you like, which will undermine expression, undermine democracy, and undermine essentially the ability for people to express themselves freely. Now, responding to what was said in the course of hearing in the Senate, Michelle Bachelet said it is human beings that have to decide, not algorithms. And in no country all countries rather, ought to be able to regulate this particular issue. And of course, supranational instruments, implements have to be out there in order to deal with this particular problem effectively, in order to fight against this new form of totalitarianism and authoritarianism, which is now seeping into everything and becoming part of our reality today. We're speaking about a situation which will be a kind of far west, free for all, with Meta, X, and these other types of platforms doing whatever they want. So that what we need is a system which controls misinformation, fake news, hate speech, and freedom of expression indeed for all. Democracy, however, requires for this digital world to be checked in to a certain extent. Otherwise, it will become arbitrary at one level, extremely personal and insulting at another. So indeed, we need a closed system that has to be put in place. We need a proper framework. And I'd like to thank once again the rapporteur for this report. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me emphasize that freedom of speech or expression is protected and guaranteed by Charter of Fundamental Rights in EU and other countries too. What we are talking about is freedom of reach, and this is more complicated because it's adjusted by algorithms which slow down or speed up the content, and we are definitely not familiar with how it works. But most important thing is another. We lost the diversity. Majority of people consume the content primarily from online now. Majority of people in whole the world. And they consume it especially from social media, which are owned and influenced by two people, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. And Chinese Communist Party, of course, which take control about algorithms of TikTok. Where is Europe? If we want to strengthen our resilience, plurality, and independence of our online media environment, we definitely need to create European social network, strong, relevant, with strong identity of users and algorithms which will amplify quality, not hate speech. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's make European media great again. Thank you for your attention.
The next speaker, Mr. Marcus Vaishal.
Mr. President, upon examining our rapporteur, Madame Grippo's report titled Regulating Content Moderation on Social Media to Safeguard Freedom of Expression, I am struck by the challenges faced in managing digital platforms compared to traditional newspapers. In the world of print, journalists produce articles based on specific assignments from an editor, who reviews and publishes these pieces in a straightforward and well-defined process. This structured approach seems relatively uncomplicated and safe. Conversely, social media platforms rely on dedicated teams of content moderators who work tirelessly to review and manage a vast volume of user-generated content daily. These moderators are tasked with approving, removing, or modifying potentially thousands of contributions that come in a rapid pace. While some submissions comply with community standards, others may be overtly aggressive or infringe upon democratic principles and human rights. It is crucial to distinguish between clear illegal content, which must be removed, and provocative content that, while potentially offensive, may fall within the bounds of free expression. Each piece undergoes extensive scrutiny before a decision is made regarding its status. However, the process often resembles David fighting Goliath for these overworked moderators. The relentless influx of content can take a toll on their mental health, as highlighted in this report. Many moderators suffer from anxiety and stress due to content exposure to challenging material. Moreover, some users have pursued legal action against platforms, claiming improper removals or modifications of their content, which adds additional pressure to the moderation teams. In conclusion, we cannot accept arbitrary censorship, and one can only hope that as a society, we will gradually evolve towards a future where content moderation becomes obsolete, as we learn to communicate with greater civility and respect for one another. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Madame Louise Morel.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Rapporteur, dear colleagues. It's the first time that I'm taking the floor in this chamber, and I'm delighted to be able to do this on a subject that I feel very strongly about. Please allow me, first of all, Madam Rapporteur, to commend the quality of your work. The subject that you are dealing with is of huge interest to us all, especially given the current backdrop. The digital giants, American ones, following the election of Donald Trump, have announced that they want to give free rein to this famous freedom of expression to come back on or think about the role that they're playing up to now and to change it with regard to content moderation. Let me share one figure with you. In France, more than 3/4 of French people of more than over 12 years of age spend a lot of time on the internet and more than 3.5 hours a day. That just shows how important it is, the regulations that apply to social networks. In France, I was one of the parliamentarians responsible for the application of European regulations, that is the DSA and the DMA. And let me share 3 points with you on this. First of all, I think we need to give thought to what the role is that the state has to play with regard to regulation. Using a social network is having a form of a contractual relationship with the service that's being offered. The rules that supervise this contractual relationship should in view of the impact of social networks on our lives, strictly respect the rules of law in the member states in which they operate. To give you one example of this, based on current affairs, it's not about whether one should leave Twitter or X, but I think what we should ask ourselves is Twitter should, of course, comply with the rules that we're imposing on it. And the more we are in a position to harmonise the rules in the member states, the stronger position we'll be in to face up to these digital giants. The second point I want to make is with regard to freedom of expression. We are dealing with a huge paradox because it's the opponents to our democracies and the rule of law which claim to be the supposed guarantors of the freedom of expression, and they're creating a huge amount of confusion for our citizens. In this field, I think that our discussion should be with regard to how responsive states can be and their ability to respond. Let me give you an example. If someone makes racist or anti-Semitic comments, of course it's understandably the person will be condemned. But if the same person makes his comments, is filmed, and the video is seen by millions of people on the internet, then the harm is far greater for the victim. The moderation of social networks takes time, and this is a central issue. How should we manage the time side of things, and how can we protect victims from here? And the third comment I wanted to make is with regard to the anonymity, and I'd like to share a metaphor with you with road safety. When you're driving a car, you don't have your name on the car, of course, but you have a number plate. If you commit an offence against the highway code, then of course the state knows who you are and you can be sanctioned by the state. Whereas when you're browsing on the internet, we don't quite know who you are, and we ask the platforms to provide us with information. It doesn't always work as we want it to. I think if we want to make proper headway in this field, then we need to strengthen our discussions on the place of the state and the place of time and the role that we want to give to anonymity in this field. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Jamila Madeira.
President. First of all, I would like to thank the rapporteur for such a relevant report with such a deep concern about freedom and proper information dissemination. Like the music says, video killed the radio show. So now we know that the social media is killing video, and video is aiming to survive the aggressive communication approach that's being used at this extreme level. We know that if the dog is the aggressor of the man, nothing spicy is there to communicate. But if the man bites the dog, then it's news. At this level of communication, we know that somehow it's biased information, but it's still information. But today, communication is different. What this report signals is the danger of private internet operators and online media platforms with dominant positions on internet services that restrict information and disseminate disinformation with a clear violation of users' rights to information. Not only that, but the danger that these operators may use the information that they have from users to deliver driven messages with ideological purposes and with anti-human rights content. Communication in our time is increasing between more isolated people. Social media increases loneliness, and that changes the way an individual reacts to events in his life and to other collective events that are reported in social media. People become more negative, depressed, and have low self-esteem, and that affects awareness and perception. We should bear in mind that a Supreme Court in Europe already demanded the repetition of an election in a European country following this clear violation of users' rights. Today, we may say that the democratic process was always challenged by the transparency of media, and that was tough for us. But now it's being abused by the international deregulated media. Today, more than ever, without auto-regulation or self-regulation. High-level dangers are in front of us, and we must not avoid acting in accordance. Responsibility, accountability, ability for a speedy action that avoids and diminishes inappropriate messages is essential and urgent. I would like to enhance the urgency that the Spanish Prime Minister made a few days ago to implement the European Digital Act, underlining the need to end anonymity in social media, to open algorithm black box, to call accountable the CEOs of the social media that violate digital laws. Let's fight for that. Only that way we fight to defend democracy and freedom and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Mustafa Kanbi.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I would like to thank the rapporteur for her priceless report. Freedom of expression, a fundamental pillar of modern democracy. Without it, genuine democracy cannot thrive. In our increasingly interconnected world, the exchange of ideas and opinions predominantly occurs online, especially through social media platforms, websites, and search engines. Upholding this right, both online and offline, is vital for fostering open dialogue and the diverse perspectives that enrich our democratic society. Social media platforms have transformed the dynamics of freedom of expression and freedom of information. Social media has shown to be a double-edged sword in terms of this interaction. On one side, it has facilitated discussions and connections among individuals at a level that was once beyond imagination. Conversely, this platform has also been utilized to advance prejudice, bias, fear, and hatred, disseminate false information, and provoke violence and harassment. This situation clearly shows us that freedom of expression is a fundamental but not an absolute right, and it should be regulated with a balanced approach that considers the responsibilities of the government, social media companies, and citizens. States have both an obligation not to interfere in individuals' freedom of expression and also to take positive measures to ensure that the right to freedom of expression can be effectively enjoyed online. Therefore, governments should take proactive measures to ensure the protection of human rights standards on social media platforms. In addition to the obligation of states, it is crucial for social media platforms to formulate their terms and conditions in such a manner that individuals are able to fully exercise their freedom of expression online. Social media companies should refrain from implementing regulations that might result in censorship. However, they must also take measures to address content that includes hate speech, harassment, and misinformation. However, I firmly believe that in today's digital landscape, restrictive measures are insufficient. A more effective approach is to promote media literacy, which empowers individuals to critically evaluate media messages and make informed choice about the content they consume. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Larissa Bilose.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I would like to thank the rapporteur, Madam Valentina Gripo, for a very important report, as social media became the modern-day agora, and we become very reliable on information, and we get most of from social media. We can share our thoughts, we can engage in debate, and more than 2,000 years ago, Octavian launched disinformation campaign to destroy his rival Mark Antony and eventually become the first Roman Empire Caesar. Since those ancient times, information has been fabricated and manipulated to win wars, advance political ambitions, hurt the vulnerable, and make financial profits. This resolution is a safeguard for democracy, truth, and justice, and I absolutely agree with the rapporteur that while social media companies have a responsibility to combat illegal content, their power must be regulated to prevent the unjust silencing of voices. I would give one example. Just several days ago, the world witnessed a horrifying crime. A video showed Russian soldiers executing 6 unarmed Ukrainian prisoners of war. These men were shot in the back, defenseless, helpless, murdered in violation of the Geneva Convention and God's laws. Social media played a crucial role in bringing this atrocity to light. And this crucial evidence of crime, like many others, was deleted under vague content moderation rules. Voices of victims often being silenced, their testimonies lost in this digital delete because an algorithm misidentifies suffering as sensitive content. This is why we must support this resolution. I absolutely agree that content, even if removed due to legal obligations, must not be permanently deleted if it holds a very vital and evidentiary value. We must ensure clear, accessible, and fair content moderation policies that uphold fundamental rights of people. We must establish clear international safeguards. Let us stand for the truth and justice. Remember the words that have been said hundreds of times in this hemicycle. The path of human rights is the one we all must follow. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Marija Petruevska.
Thank you, distinguished Chair. Mesdames et Messieurs, dear colleagues, I would like to congratulate the reporter on her work. Communication on the internet and social networks provide us with the freedom to express ourselves freely on various topics that we are interested in. However, concerns can be raised expressed that hate speech and disinformation spread on the social media might undermine the social cohesion and democratic integrity of a society. Social media platforms has become major challenge for dissemination, exchange, and circulation of information to billions of users around the world over the internet. Just look what Russia's disinformation campaign has done to the democracy, or what disinformation, fake news, and hate speech has done to EU enlargement policy for the Western Balkans, including my country. Creating and implementing appropriate policy that will address these challenges are of global importance. The Council of Europe intervention on freedom of expression and the media is based on a holistic approach, which aims to include and engage all relevant actors and stakeholders in improving the application of freedom of expression based on the European standards and best practices. The capacity of the media regulation bodies must be further strengthened in consideration for better implementation of their powers regarding the protection of human rights and freedom of expression. Media stakeholders and relevant partners, including universities and civil societies, organizations must also cooperate and contribute to an environment that enables freedom of expression and freedom of the media. Our common responsibility is to maintain an environment where the plurality and diversity of views and opinions is encouraged. But at the same time, the users are protected from disinformation, fake news, and hate speech, which present a threat to human rights and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Luz Martinez-Seyo. Not here? Then I call Mr. Martinez-Gedviles.
Dear colleagues, I thank the rapporteur for this important work. It is a fact that social media is a very powerful tool today. For years, social media has helped people in Europe and give a voice to those who need it. It has also supported democracy, connected communities, and even helped in times of crisis, showing the power of free communication. However, the influence of a few major companies who threatens this freedom decision about what we see, share, and discuss are often made with limited transparency and accountability. This creates risk of democracy, personal security, and human rights. Social media is not just a business anymore. It has become a basic need that connects us all. That's why we cannot allow social media to be used to spread lies or hurt democracy. Also, we need clear rules so people know why their content is removed. They should also know before if their account will be banned. Workers who check contents also need better pay and protection. They work hard but are treated badly. Finally, social media should not just make money for big companies. It must keep helping society, sharing true information, and respecting people's rights. We must make sure it stays fair for everyone. Let's work together for a fair and democratic digital space. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Madam Liliana Tanguy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, today the social networks have become spaces for expression and exchange that there's no escaping. But I think there's one essential question that we need to address, and that is how can we effectively regulate online content without, for all that, introducing excessive controls that would be detrimental to public debate. The Council of Europe has taken up this issue as of 2012 with the first report on freedom of expression on the internet, and the draft resolution before us today pursues the same objectives by advocating transparency of platforms, prohibition of shadow banning, and the introduction of independent conflict resolution bodies. So I welcome this initiative, and I'd like to underscore that regulating online content requires a concerted approach involving both international bodies and fora, but also national legislation. The European Union has adopted the Digital Services Act, that imposes tougher obligations on the major platforms in terms of transparency and responsibility for content moderation. And the text also deals with the fight against hate speech and online disinformation. In France, considerable progress has been made, in particular with the law on influencers, with a view to regulating their practice and stemming any abuse or excesses on the social networks. And tougher measures against hate line have been introduced, with tougher sanctions and closer cooperation with the platforms to ensure rapid takedown of any illicit content. There's much at stake accompanying the emergence of artificial intelligence, whilst at the same time effectively fighting disinformation. Society is awaiting answers, but those answers have to uphold our democratic principles. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Monsieur Christophe Lecroix.
Merci.
Thank you very much, President. I'll be speaking in French, and I will confess one thing to you, something that I am guilty of. I decided to launch a petition on social networks to talk about regulating them or even banning them. Do you think that would be possible? Now, who would read my petition? My friends, people on Instagram, Facebook, or on X? No. In actual fact, it would be the algorithm which would decide, on the basis of my ideas, which target audience to go for. So my opinion cannot get beyond the algorithm. Why is that the case? It's because the algorithms, in this very perverse framework, decide themselves according to certain biases which have been input by employees of Meta, Google, or whoever. So, I mean, that might appear to be ridiculous, but in fact it's not, because that is the way that you influence views, because you've got billions of pieces of data, billions of reactions on social networks, and that's how you determine public opinion, shape public opinion, and interfere in public processes by shaping opinion, by building majorities and trying to put in place those kinds of governments which are in favor of deregulation. So why is Elon Musk in the American government now? He is up there alongside Donald Trump. He is there to attack the European Union because the European Union is the only body which, to date, has laid down rules for social networks. And therefore, if he is to continue to preserve his grip on power, we have the boss of Google and Elon Musk working together. I mean, there is at the very least an overlap of interest between populists and the extreme right and the billionaire owners, proprietors of these social networks who are seeking to interfere in our electoral processes. And we've seen that for ourselves in Germany, the extent to which Elon Musk is lining up alongside the AfD. So, you know, people trying to get us to believe that this is all about freedom of expression. Absolutely not. They wish to continue to promote their propaganda unregulated, free of any constraints, to capture democracy. It's a very important tool, and they are going to therefore do everything to counter clear regulation of AE, which believes that it is a solution for our democracies, but making sure that there are proper guardrails and limitations. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Brian Francis.
Speaker. Honourable colleagues, both in Canada and internationally, freedom of expression is a fundamental right. But like all rights, it's not without limits. For instance, there are clear prohibitions against hate speech and discriminatory language which undermines the rights and dignity of others. It is precisely this kind of harmful speech that has proliferated in recent years on social media platforms. Rapporteur Grippo's report emphasizes the critical role social media companies play in content moderation. And it couldn't have come at a more crucial time. As we know, Meta announced it would cease its fact-checking program in the US on Facebook and Instagram. This decision poses a significant risk of amplifying hate speech and misinformation with serious consequences. For marginalized communities, this is particularly concerning. In previous interventions in this Assembly, I have highlighted the issue of residential school denialism in Canada. That is, the refusal of some to acknowledge the profound abuses inflicted upon Indigenous Canadians in these institutions and the long-lasting trauma that endures. This denialism goes beyond the mere claim that residential schools did not exist. It actively distorts the history and the impacts of the system, minimizing the lived experiences of survivors and undermining their suffering. There is an urgent need to combat this dangerous phenomenon. In Canada, the Independent Special Interlocutor for Missing Children and Unmarked Graves and Burial Sites, a role created in response to the legacy of the residential schools, has highlighted the lack of educational and punitive measures to counter denialism. She has called on the Canadian government to require search, social, and digital companies to immediately remove the spread of misinformation and falsehoods about residential schools, missing and disappeared children, and unmarked graves. Today's report, in addition, emphasizes the need for human moderators who are trained to recognize and address unique cultural and territorial nuances. I wholeheartedly support this recommendation. Combating denialism in all forms is not only an Indigenous issue. It is a societal responsibility for all of us. It is our collective duty to ensure that this denialism does not undermine progress towards truth, justice, and reconciliation for vulnerable communities in Canada and around the world. Walalan, thank you, merci.
Thank you. I call Madame Sandra Rigol.
President, dear colleagues, to avoid damaging your ears, I will speak in French. Unis dans la diversité.
United in diversity, it's the sort of European slogan, and it's diversity that is being attacked under the pretext of freedom of expression. It's being attacked. There's a global offensive that has been waged. It's organized, it's monetized with a view to normalizing what we say, the way we live, what remains of our democracies, but in particular people. Freedom of expression, I think we've heard much talk of freedom of expression, which guarantees diversity, democracy, but we've seen as an upheaval or turning our values on their head, and freedom of expression apparently is attacking diversity, which is why it is under attack. It's a tool that is being used with a view to attacking our democracy. We're talking about communication between individuals. But today there's freedom of expression is freedom of disinformation, to lie, to come up with anti-Semitic, misogynistic, anti-Semitic insults and comments. What was a fear in the past is a reality. Yes, the social networks are attacking our democracy. We saw that in Romania, where they had to rerun the elections. We've seen it in Germany, in the UK, and I think we're seeing the same thing in all our countries, without exception, where these tools are being used in order to stem any diversity, true freedom of expression, because when you stifle freedom of expression, what remains of democracy? The legislators, our legislators are proceeding, but slowly, if I look at France, because in the face of this reactionary concerted offensive at the service of greater wealth for some, we need to unite, united in diversity, which is why I'm particularly pleased that we have this report which provides a certain number of proposals, guidelines that we can work on so that we can organize internationally in this face of this international assault or offensive. We have to be united if we are to respond. It's always the same who are attacked: women, minorities, the weak. But perhaps together, united in our diversity, we can overcome this legal obstacles in the face of threats that seek to undermine our democracies.
Speaker is Mr. Alfred Heer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a very interesting debate that we can follow, and I thank for the report. I think we have a few problems here in Europe. The first problem is that we do not control any of those social medias. They're mainly controlled by US companies, by Chinese companies, and also by Russian companies. So we can make regulations, but we cannot enforce them upon those companies. And of course, we see the problems mainly here about the social media, but it's also a chance because people today, for the first time since human beings are existing, have a voice in the social media. Before they were dependent on newspapers. If they were lucky, they could write a letter that was maybe published, maybe not, but now everyone can put his opinion on social media, and I think we also should see the chances and not only the problems with it. Of course, we have to be careful. They are powerful, those giants. They can manipulate the opinions, that's clear. With algorithms we do not understand and we do not know how they will be implemented, and that's a problem we have to face, and that's a challenge we need answers to. But Mrs. Sagol, you mentioned now before the elections in Romania, where the court decided that it was because of TikTok that the Romanian president was elected, because it was a propaganda by TikTok and the Chinese. And Julian Bulai, our head of the ALDE group, he's from Romania, and he mentioned just before in the joint committee that there has been no proof at all that there was influence, and sometimes you also have to be careful, and that's especially on the left side. If you lose, you always give the fault to someone else, you give the fault to the new technology. I remember the time when Elon Musk didn't own Twitter, when Twitter was owned by someone else. They were also moderating the content, and mainly people from the right, they were not able to express their opinion. And today it might be true that with Elon Musk, the left people, they have a problem on Twitter. And it's true also that he is pushing people from the right, as we saw it with Alice Weidel. But nevertheless, we should also see the chances and not only the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Oleksiy Gonrachenko.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're speaking now about social media. Recently, one of the biggest stars of social media, Tucker Carlson, he said that previous American administration planned to kill Putin. And now Russian state Duma, it's their parliament, Gosdura. So they were very afraid of this. They started to send some letters. I don't know, really, was somebody preparing it or not? But what I do know, that if not, that is a bad thing, because the best thing we can do is really to prepare and to kill Putin. That's exactly what we should do. I would not tell you about this just like, you know, thank you, and colleagues support this, and thank you for this. I will not remind you that if somebody would kill Hitler in 1939, 40, 41st, how many millions of lives would be saved. Let us speak about other things, maybe closer to some ordinary people, because all of us were coming back to our voters, and they have concrete questions to us. Electricity bills. I can tell you, to kill Putin means minus 30 euros per person in bills for electricity for each German. Very important. To kill Putin, it's minus 100 euros for each month for each Hungarian on fuel for their car. Very important. To kill Putin, it means minus €1 in price of croissant in France. I think it's very important. This is a very important concrete things, and by this we need to show people why we need to do this. That this is not just, our revenge or something. This is the best possible investment we can do. We are looking for great investments. The best possible investment in the world today is to kill Putin. And it shouldn't be just a script of some film of Quentin Tarantino, Kill Bill, Kill Putin. No, it should be a concrete plan realized, and everybody in the world will benefit from this. That's what we need to do. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gornychenko, I understand your passion and your commitment, but language about killing people is not appropriate in this chamber. I would respectfully suggest that to you. Our next speaker is Ms. Kat Eccles.
And I thank Valentina and the committee for their work on this really important and timely report. As elected members, we rely on social media platforms to get our messages out to constituents and share information. However, even we have to battle with algorithms which drive down engagement on content and reporting systems that do nothing to stop abuse and misinformation. When I was at school, it was a little while ago, it was before the internet, social media and mobile phones, and early on we were taught how to use critical thinking and validation of sources to analyse the value of content. The instant nature of social media has eroded these skills and allowed misinformation, propaganda and outright abuse to flourish on these platforms. While we must value freedom of expression, we must remember that it does not protect individuals from the consequences of their actions. In the UK, we saw this play out recently with the horrendous Southport murders last summer and subsequent riots, with people arrested and charged for inciting hatred and violence on all sides. Journalism has suffered badly with the rise of social media, and the number of clicks is valued over quality and validity of content. The downturn in popularity of printed press means news websites are littered with advertising and drive people to find other, often unreliable sources. We're still in the thick of the post-truth era. The rise of influence of Elon Musk in international politics is something we should all be worried about. Meta is abandoning fact-checking, and algorithms often place worrying and dangerous content in front of our young people based on generalised demographics. Reporting systems need to do better to protect users from abuse and threats. When reporting awful abuse, the last thing we want to see is an automated message telling us this does not breach community standards. It leaves one to wonder, what standards do we hold these communities to? It's a very fine line to tread to ensure we maintain freedom of expression in our democracies, but let's not forget the pernicious nature of misinformation paired with the fast pace of social media to damage trust in institutions, experts and governments. Colleagues, please support Amendment 6 to support quality, ethical journalism and fact-checking to help combat misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Mr. Rotislav Tishtik.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, social media have become an important platform for exchanging views, disseminating information, and mobilizing society. At the same time, in the context of the war in Ukraine, their influence has become even more significant. These platforms have become an arena for information warfare, whereas disinformation, propaganda, and hate speech are actively spreading along with the truth. According to the Minister of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, in the first 6 months of Russia's full-scale invasion alone, more than 200,000 complaints were filed about disinformation and social networks. Many of them concerned publications that questioned Ukrainians' right to independence, spread fake news about the war, and discredited the armed forces of Ukraine. At the same time, content moderation during wartime requires a special approach. For example, social networks must ensure that preservation of deleted materials that may serve as evidence of war crimes. According to a report by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, social networks should refrain from permanently deleting such content. This is especially important for Ukraine, as documenting the aggressor's crimes is key to future international trials. Another challenge is hate speech. According to research, more than 60% Ukrainian users have encountered hostility or discrimination online due to their patriotic views. It's important here that content moderation is fast, effective, and aimed at protecting people's rights, but at the same time does not hinder freedom of speech. The problem of shadow banning, when posts by Ukrainian activists, journalists, or volunteers are downgraded in ratings for no apparent reason, has also become a unique challenge. This limits the audience access to truthful information. Ukraine is already taking important steps in the direction. In 2022, a working group was created to communicate with social media platforms, and this cooperation has resulted in the removal of over 20,000 accounts and pages that were spreading by Russia propaganda. However, to ensure effective content moderation that meets the challenges of war, new international standards need to be implemented, and Ukraine can play a key role in shaping these approaches and ensuring a balance between protecting freedom of expression and countering disinformation. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize, in a war where information is one of the main tools, regulating content moderation becomes a matter not only of freedom of speech, but also of national security. We must act together to protect truth and freedom in this critical time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Francesco Sobara.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I would like to start off by thanking the rapporteur, Ms. Valentina Grippo, buonasera, signora, whose report rightly insists on the importance of striking a balance between the different rights, freedoms, and interests at stake in the regulation of content moderation on social media. Finding this balance has proven to be a legislative challenge in the Canadian Parliament in the past few years. The idea mentioned in the resolution that the press and the media in general use social media as a platform for disseminating information to the public comes up against the fact that Meta ended news availability on Facebook and Instagram for all Canadian users in June 2023. This was Meta's unfortunate reaction to the adoption of the Canadian legislation entitled the Online News Act. The objective of the Online News Act is to ensure that dominant platforms like Meta and Google compensate news publishers in Canada for making their content available, and thus to enhance fairness in the digital news space, digital news marketplace, and contribute to its sustainability. Users have become accustomed to checking the news on Facebook and Instagram, and that space left empty got filled by influencers and other less reliable sources of information. A few weeks ago, Meta decided to put an end to its independent third-party fact-checking program and to replace it with community notes, similar to what X has in place. According to Meta's CEO, content moderation across its platforms has led to censorship, and it is now time to renew the company's commitment to freedom of expression. But what we all know, in liberal democracies, freedom of expression has rights and also responsibilities. You do have the right to express yourself, but you do not have the freedom of expression to state lies, to say a fire is in place in a building, or to state that the Holocaust did not happen. That is wrong. The balance between freedom of expression needs to be met. According to Meta's CEO, content moderation across its platforms has led to censorship, as I stated. However, fact-checking plays an important role in content moderation and the fundamental rights and freedoms of certain people, victims of mis or disinformation and harmful online content, might be more at risk than the freedom of expression of social media users in general. As we see today, the threat to liberal democracies around the world is disinformation online. one of the aspects of, particularly from far-right information services. To deal with the specificity of online activities, the Canadian government has introduced several bills in recent years, such as the Online Streaming Act, which became law in 2023. The government also introduced Bill 63, which would have enacted the Online Harms Act to promote online safety and protect children's health while safeguarding freedom of expression. Unfortunately, in Canada, the right wing, the Conservatives, have blocked even basic protections for children that are going online. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Mr. Jose Maria Sanchez Garcia. The next speaker is Ms. Kosta-Danowska. No? She is? No. Ms. Vasilenko. The next speaker, Ms. Vasilenko.
President. Before I begin, I would like to thank Valentina and this esteemed assembly for dedicating the efforts to this very important topic and for dedicating the time to fighting off propaganda in the best way that we can in this House. We live in an era where wars are not only fought on battlefields, but also in the digital space. Disinformation has become a weapon, and social media is one of its most powerful delivery systems. For years, Russia has waged a hybrid war against Ukraine and Europe using social media platforms to spread propaganda, manipulate public opinion, and destabilize democratic societies. Russia's strategy is calculated: sow doubt, create division, and weaken democratic resilience. We have seen this in Ukraine, but also in elections across Europe, where Russian-backed influence campaigns have attempted to shape political outcomes. Unchecked, these efforts will continue to grow, threatening the very foundations of democracy. This is why today's resolution is not just about online speech. It is about protecting democracy itself. Regulating content moderation must be a priority. Social media companies cannot be passive enablers of information warfare. They must take responsibility. Enforce transparency and algorithmic decision-making. We must know who and what gets amplified. Implement strict policies against state-sponsored disinformation campaigns, strengthen moderation mechanisms to prevent the spread of deepfake propaganda, and safeguard independent journalism from being drowned out by manufactured lies. Freedom of expression is a fundamental right, but it does not extend to orchestrated deception at dismantling democratic societies. We must draw a clear line between free speech and hybrid warfare. If we fail, we risk allowing social media to become the ultimate weapon of authoritarian regimes, and we simply cannot fail. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Madame Valérie Pilet-Caral.
Merci, Monsieur le. Thank you, President. Colleagues, to begin, I'd like to thank our colleague Valentina Grippo for her report regulating content moderation on social media to safeguard freedom of expression. The report calls on social network companies to refrain from applying policies that wrongly limit freedom of expression of users. Their terms and conditions have to be clear, easily accessible, and based on the principles of fundamental rights. The report further calls on these companies to provide content moderators with in-depth training and appropriate working conditions, including mental health care services, because viewing violent or paedophile videos can have a traumatic effect. Social network companies have to inform users when they take content moderation measures in a detailed and rapid way. Their system for dealing with complaints have to be accessible, easy to use, and they also must contribute to the establishment of independent extrajudicial conflict resolution bodies, as the report states. Points 2 and 4 in the draft resolution, I think, are essential given the current context. They recall that although most of the social network companies are American, they are bound to abide by the law or laws of the countries in which they provide their services. The representatives of these social network companies have to be, therefore, accessible. But Trump's election, unfortunately, has convinced Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, to make a U-turn and do away with content moderation on his platforms, moderation that all of a sudden he denounces as coming out of what he refers to as the industrial censorship complex. He decided to follow in the footsteps of his competitor Elon Musk, who, after buying Twitter in 2022, started off by dismissing the content moderation team of his platform, now X. In Trump speak, this term censorship covers measures that are nevertheless necessary in order to moderate content and avoid disinformation. But Zuckerberg has already announced the end of a certain number of restrictions on posts that have to do with gender or immigration. It is an open door for sort of insults, racist insults, and hate speech that promotes violence. It is essential that we regulate content on the social networks. It has nothing to do with censorship. We cannot allow people to say anything that they want to. And I think in the light of recent declarations by Musk and Zuckerberg with regard to their platforms, I think we need to be vigilant. We have to fight against fake news in order to preserve democracy. Freedom of speech can only exist if algorithms do not manipulate information. So, colleagues, I encourage you to support the report and uphold human rights and the quality of our information. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Mr. Namik Tam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished colleagues, social media has provided a vital space for public debate, citizen engagement, and democratic participation. However, it has also brought forward new dilemmas, particularly concerning the balance between combating harmful content and preserving the fundamental right to free speech. Many nations, including my own country, Turkey, have struggled with this delicate balance. Content moderation policies have often been used to limit legitimate criticism and dissent under the guise of combating harmful content. This has raised valid concerns among citizens and the international community about the erosion of freedom of expression. The solution, I believe, lies in the international cooperation and the establishment of clear and universal principles for regulating content moderation. And our Council is in a unique position to lead this effort. We must advocate for transparency in how social media platforms enforce their content moderation policies. Algorithms and decision-making processes should be subject to independent oversight to ensure they do not inadvertently discriminate or suppress lawful expression. Furthermore, it is imperative to create mechanisms for accountability. When content moderation decisions are contested, users should have access to fair, impartial, and timely appeals processes. These mechanisms should respect national laws while adhering to international human rights standards. Social media should serve as a platform for inclusion, dialogue, and innovation rather than fear or division. To this end, I propose the following principles to guide content moderation regulations. First, measures to address harmful content must be proportionate and targeted, avoiding blanket bans or broad restrictions. Second, both governments and platforms must be held accountable for respecting users' rights. This requires robust legal frameworks and independent oversight bodies. Third, Platforms should publish detailed transparency reports and share information on how they moderate content, including their use of artificial intelligence. Fourth, there must be alignment between national and international regulations to prevent arbitrary enforcement and ensure that human rights standards are upheld globally. Dear colleagues, regulating social media content moderation is not a question of whether it should be done, but how it can be done without compromising the fundamental freedoms that underpin our democracies. The Council of Europe must lead by example, crafting policies that balance security with liberty and ensuring that social media remains a space for free exchange of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our list of speakers. And colleagues, can I thank you for your indulgence and forgiveness if I've pronounced anyone's name incorrectly. I can tell you that's happened to me many times. I was once introduced to an audience as not Mr. Twohig, but Mr. Toothache. We now go on to the rapporteur. Ms. Grippo, you have 3 minutes to reply.
Chair, okay. Colleghi, Chair.
Colleagues, this has been an extremely interesting discussion, extremely enriching, and I would like to thank all colleagues for having engaged with this subject, because the platforms are, of course, at the very core of our democracies and right to freedom of expression. I think we've emphasized the power which is wielded by social media, and the report, of course, obviously came about as a result of our listening to the platforms as well as associations and ordinary people to try and ensure that we had a comprehensive overview. So we just have to remember this is just piece of a bigger jigsaw. The Council of Europe, of course, alongside all kinds of other global institutions, has looked at all kinds of facets of the subject in recent years. We had a report on propaganda, for example, that we adopted just a couple of months ago, along with reports on freedom of expression, on media freedom, and specific reports on conflict situations. And that's why, in committee, we deliberately decided to restrict the scope of this report. And where we decided not to accept certain amendments, it was precisely for that reason. We had to be extremely strict with this report because we want to be streamlined, we want to be focused, we want to be effective. So we're trying to balance very important rights. And we wanted to go beyond a mere declaration of intent. We wanted to have specific measures which could be used in practice. So we've tried to factor in a variety of different views to make sure these are things we can actually use in future in our dealings with platforms. So we didn't want to dilute the message, if you like. We didn't want to water it down. There are other points that colleagues have made but have already been incorporated in our other reports on, say, propaganda or freedom of expression. Now, when I embarked on this piece of work, I didn't realize it was going to be so topical. I mean, we started all of this about a year ago in the Culture Committee, and I would like to thank everybody on the committee who's done such a good job of work on the issue. And of course, recently, having heard statements by some of the major proprietors and given developments throughout the world, we have come to be dealing with something that is highly topical, and not for the first time the Council of Europe is on the front line when it comes to tackling such a sensitive issue. So thank you all very much, and I invite you to support the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Does the Second Vice Chair, Ms. Helen Hoyo, Second Vice Chair of the Committee, wish to speak? If you do, you have 3 minutes.
you, President. I will speak in Spanish. Estimados colegas.
Colleagues, good afternoon to all of you. Now, Isaac Asimov, US writer, said that change continues, it is inevitable, and that is the dominant factor in contemporary society. And so no decisions can be taken without taking account of the world as it is, as well as how the world will be in future. Ladies and gentlemen, in these difficult times, we are confronted on a daily basis with unexpected developments and events. A couple of weeks ago, we had a video from Mark Zuckerberg which hit the headlines, and we have had turbulence on Wall Street following on from the release of a new Chinese chatbot, DeepSeek. We therefore have got to take account of the technological changes which are upending our societies, but we cannot allow the visions and desires of Silicon Valley to prevail. That is why we've got to make sure that it is up to our citizens to decide on their own futures. If we're clear about what we want, then we've got to defend that view on all fronts. Ms. Grippo's report centers on the protection of freedom of expression on social networks. That is an extremely topical issue, one on which she has done a great job of work, because there are different interests at stake. One of her ideas is that we have a draft resolution whereby we, as she has said, look at the actions of the proprietors of social networks who are able to control the flow of information onto their networks without being accountable to anybody. They are a tool for freedom of expression, but on occasion they are also a threat, particularly to the youngest in our societies, and that is why we need to be on our guards and to exercise great caution. Ms. Grippo's report met with great support in the committee, and I hope it will meet with similar support here in the chamber. I would also like to take this opportunity, President, to pay special thanks to somebody here with us this evening. Roberto Fassino, who is the head of this committee's secretariat, has been with this assembly for over 40 years, and he will be retiring tomorrow. I think all of us here know just how important the teams behind us are. Without them, we would not be able to do our work properly. And so, Mr. Fassino, for all of your work, your untiring, unfailing, serious efforts and hard work over many years, I am certain that you well deserve spending more time with your family, and you can rest assured that you made your contribution to a better Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The debate is now closed. The Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution to which 6 amendments have been tabled. I understand that the Vice Chair of the Committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendments 1, 2 and 6 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved, be declared as definitively approved. Is that so, Ms. Hoyoo? It is. If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there an objection? Wrong one. Bit premature there. Amendments 1, 2 and 6 to the draft resolutions are therefore approved and will not be called. I understand that the Vice Chair of the Committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendments 4, 3 and 5 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the Committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as rejected. Is that so, Ms. Hoyoo?
Así es, señor presidente.
If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be definitively rejected. Is there an objection? We got 10. Yeah, this one. Please said. The request of the committee is rejected, so each amendment will be taken individually in order in which they appear on the compendium. Yes. I call Mr. Pavel Jablonski to support Amendment 4, and you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Amendment 4 introduces into resolution a very clear distinction that any limitation freedom of speech must be only considered as a last resort, and the obligation to permanently remove content may only be imposed if there is appropriate national legal procedure, because we can agree that some content we like, some we don't like, but to remove something, to censor something, there must be legal remedy, and this amendment fulfills this principle.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I call the rapporteur. Oh, I'm sorry, beg your pardon, I didn't see.
Microphone. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are against this amendment and I give a concrete example. If there incitement is incitement to hatred or violence, for instance, there should be an immediate reaction of the social media platform. You cannot wait for a judicial procedure to happen. Judicial control can be organized afterwards, a posteriori, but when there is incitement to hatred or violence, the social media platform should react immediately and withdraw the post. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment is rejected. 19, my page again. I call Ms. Yevina Kruchek to support Amendment 3. You have 30 seconds. Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment number 3 is guided by the same spirit, and it actually, to some extent, addresses what our Belgian colleague said, that there should be some a posteriori procedures. Well, very well if they would be, but they need to be swift, they need to be efficient. If we have a situation that something requires immediate attention, if something is illegal, I agree, it should be immediate, but the response should be by the state, by police, by prosecution, legal proceedings, and not a private company that decides. A posteriori can take a lot of time, and justice delayed is justice denied.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the same argument, and the problem in the amendment is that it states that control should be prior to any removal. Of course, when there's incitement to hatred or violence, it is not possible to wait for a judicial procedure to withdraw the posts on social media. So for that reason, we propose also not to accept this amendment.
Thank you. I now put the amendment, the committee rejected the amendment with a 2/3 majority, so I now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment is rejected. I now call Mr. Pavel Jablonski to support Amendment 5. You have 30 seconds.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, if we need immediate action, let's act immediately. And we in this Assembly are setting standards for the countries to follow.
Court proceedings can be swift, can be efficient, can be immediate. If we impose a procedure, if we impose a principle that would oblige countries to act as such, they will comply if we pressure them effectively. So I urge you, colleagues, to introduce it, because this forbids the countries from removing content solely by virtue of political administrative decision. There must be judicial control, otherwise it is censorship. We had that in Poland prior to 1999, we know it very well.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against? Yes.
The question here is the same as for the two other amendments, so we propose to vote against.
The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put this amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And the amendment is rejected. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 16089 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I now call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution is adopted. That's it on that. Colleagues, before we complete the business, I understand there is a point of order.
Thank you so much, dear President. I would like to take a point of order. I have voted no for the vote on Mrs. Çelik-Kanat's report, Women in Economy, Employment, Entrepreneurship and Gender-Responsive Budgeting. That was by accident. I would like to put it on record that I meant to vote yes. Please, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that clarification. It will be noted. Colleagues, that completes our business. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow at 10 a.m. with the agenda approved on Monday. Thank you. This sitting is adjourned. Don't I have a gavel to bang now?